7. Spreading thick. A drop of poison. Chapter 6. Spreading thick. Disclaimer. Naruto belongs to Kishimoto. Ramen belongs to Naruto. Enough said. Naruto's message to spread as a combined information trading network had reached the dozen of bunchins with the remaining summoning scroll right as they were leaving Hakudocho. The group had made very good time mainly because of a fortunate discovery. They had an easier time with Kawarimi if they warped long distances. They'd tested while moving out of Konoha. A simple Kawarimi meant to move you 5 meters ahead failed 90% of the time, while one going for a distance of 20 or so meters actually succeeded half the time. At 100, they'd only failed once out of 50 or so tries, and farther from that was even better. They could easily manage 500 meters or more, with the record being a jump of somewhere around 4 kilometers. This led to a very bizarre game of tag between clones that went from the Leaf Village to the border of Fire Country, all in a single night. The group had rested and refilled its reserves once in Grass Country, and had managed to find the required village well before sundown. Upon receiving Naruto's orders, each of the copies had made another, and all the newly created ones spread out to gather information around in nearby cities. The others made a final few Kawarimis and reached the first trees of the forest. Unsealing all the necessary equipment, the lead clone worked the blood vials to trace a line down the summoning scroll. It took more than 2 complete containers before the scroll consumed itself, and before long Aikibo was back before the group. That was faster than I thought, was the first words that came out of his mouth as he appeared. Leaf Village was a week away from Grass, last I remembered. We found a good trick for covering long distances. I can see that. Is the original one of you? Nope. Damn. Aikibo patted the ground twice with his back paw in frustration. In that case, follow me. The dozen copies did so. The wood wasn't that large but was incredibly dense, and the path the rabbit took was more fitting of a labyrinth than a forest. It took an hour before the group reached a large clearing, in whose middle grew a tall tree amongst rocks. Wait a tick. Okay. That said, Aikibo dashed towards the tree in a few bounds and disappeared between the rocks. It wasn't long before he was back, holding a scroll as tall as he was. He left it a meter or so before the group of now sitting Narutos and used it as a podium. Before I give you this scroll, I have a question to ask. Go on, the lead ninja answered. Why do you want to be a ninja? The rabbit asked. To be Hokage, of course. The whole set of orange ninjas nodded along. Hokage, that's the leader of your village, right? The Narutos nodded. Why do you want that? The group leader paused a moment before answering. The people in my village, they hate and fear us. Not because of anything we did, but because of something that happened when the original was born. We don't want it to be like that. Then we saw the old man. I mean, the current Hokage. He's respected, he's loved, and for good reason too. We wanna be like that. We wanna protect my precious people and have them see me as an equal, not as something that should be eliminated or tortured. And Konoha is a precious thing to me. Does that make sense? It does to me, the black rabbit answered. He though the blonde was like most people, thinking ninjas were cool because they were strong. That or his family pushing him in that direction. Aikibo was glad to see that the boy was there of his own decision, having a good idea what the job entailed. Here, Aikibo handed the lead Naruto the scroll. You deserve it. Thanks. This will allow me to summon all of you. No, this will summon my boss, the leader of all rabbits. He wants you to summon him in your burrow, and to meet you in person. My burrow. Your home. The place you summoned me first. Have the real one summon him like you did for me. Okay, thanks a lot. The lead clone put the scroll down in one of his pockets then turned towards the rest of the group. Okay people, let's see if we can beat our previous speed and be back in Konoha before tomorrow night. Yosh. A second later, all the Narutos were gone. Aikibo, however, turned to face the tree in the center of the clearing. So, what do you think? Dispelling the genjutsu that had hidden him, the lead figure answered. He is different, I will give you that. He is untrained in the dance of battle, but has great spirit, another added. The third figure said nothing. He smells of fox, though, the leading one said. He already has a contract. Not that I know of, Aikibo answered. He didn't seem to know much about summoning at all. The rabbit waited a moment. So, your feelings? We will see, the leading figure smiled. After coming back from escorting his teaching friend home and messaging his far-off clones, Naruto paused to look at the mass of clones training in his underground base. All of them were now training on the chakra shield technique, hoping to have it down before the week ended and classes restarted. None of the Narutos had even gotten close yet. Jumping between 2 rock pillars, the original shinobi came to rest atop one. He'd been using this particular spot as a training area for the last few days, right after he'd used it as a lookout while battling the summoned crab. The best thing about it was that he could easily see all around without much trouble, and the fact that his clones could find him without much effort. After a quick look around to see if anyone needed his help, Naruto sat down and focused on the specifics of this technique, as they had been written on the scroll. There weren't many. The technique was, in essence, very easy. It had no seals or other movement, only raw application of chakra. It was all about compressing said energy and using it as an extra layer of skin. Looking back to the sea of orange training below, Naruto quickly realized they were all going at it in similar ways, each releasing chakra in bursts and trying to make it solid, if only for a second. It didn't seem to be making much progress, either. He'd try something different, then. Naruto released his chakra in one continuous surge, a blue aura of power forming around his entire body. Now, compressing it, he said to himself, trying to force his own energies to his will. So, you expect to be in Konoha in 2 days. Yup, the caravan master said. Just make sure to be here at 8 tomorrow morning. If ya or yours ain't there, we be leaving without you. No worries, sir, the lead clone answered after a look at his family. We will be there. Perfect. The group of Naruto left the caravan depot toward the motel they had rented earlier. The decision to use such means to enter the Leaf Village had come upon seeing one such caravan on the way to the city they were currently in, and had decided as a group that this way would be much more normal for a civilian family. They'd rented a place in one the biggest caravan they'd found in the city that was continuing to Konoha, claiming that the previous caravan they had taken had gone no farther than this point. Now back in the privacy of their shared room, the group released their transformations, saving up chakra that way. So, how many clones should we make? The Naruto impersonating the father asked. Well, the clone added. You did notice we received a message to spread clones outside Konoha. The three others nodded. Why should we create more than one each? I'll answer you with a question. Did you notice how many caravans were in town? And how many destinations they covered? I have a good idea about the number, but not so much about the destinations. The two other clones shook their heads negatively. I have to agree most caravans' final destination is wind, but they have different way of getting there. Grass, river, bird, rain, those are all on the path to wind. We already have a team in grass, added one of the children clones, but none in the others. And that list doesn't include all those not passing by wind. I saw caravans going to waterfall, vegetable and rice field along with one going by sea to tea country. If we send clones in all of those, we have a good third of all the great countries covered. Point, said the second of the child clones. I think I can manage a good 5, how about you? That night, 30 more copies stealthily left the motel that the false family was using, and by the next day they were on their way outside of Fire Country. Shiro Nokaru was a proud chunin of the Leaf who, as was usual for him, was assigned the surveillance of a part of the tall stockade surrounding Konoha. It was a job he'd done more than any other in his life, and that he was satisfied as such. Having been to such a post for a long while, he thought he'd seen everything outside of full-out war. That was why, 2 hours into his guard shift, he was graced by the sight of something he'd never expected to be possible. There was a boy climbing the wall. And by climbing he didn't mean wall walking. He'd already seen some of those, new genins having just been taught the method, trying to prove themselves great by climbing the tallest building they could see. Those climbing the wall usually got off lucky, at least compared to those trying the same on the Hokage monument. The Anbu were much less forgiving on average. No, this kid was doing it the old-fashioned method, with a knife in each hand and some kind of spike on his shoes. Shiro had to admire the guts the kid had. The wall itself was taller than most buildings in the city, and was hard rock. If he missed, the fall would surely kill him. The chunin decided to wait until he'd finished his ascent, or to catch him if he fell. It took an hour for the boy to finish his climb. The wall guard had to give it to the boy. He had stamina, especially considering he didn't look a day over 12. Dispelling the genjutsu he'd used to hide himself, the chunin asked, "Is there any reason why you did that?" Surprised, the boy turned while jumping to the side. Good reflexes, Shiro noted, though his balance could use some work. How did you get here? The kid said, his weapons 2 knives so dull by the climb he would have hurt a fly with them in a decent offensive position. A ninja never tells his secrets. You're a ninja. The boy's face changed instantly, a big smile shining on it. This is Konoha, right? Shiro nodded. I wanna join. The face became pleading. You want to be a ninja? Yeah, and what do your parents have to say about that? The face the boy made answered all of the chunin's questions. Rage, sadness, pain, loneliness, all mixed together. Either the boy's parents died recently, or he'd been abandoned not so long ago. Tell you what, he changed the subject. I still have 2 hours before my break, so I'm going to test you until then. If you do good enough, I'll bring you to the academy for enrolling, okay? The boy's face teared up again, but this time in happiness. Thank you, he cried out, bowing as he did. What's your name? Murmuru. Don't thank me yet, Murmuru, Shiro smiled. He then put him to the test. The whole works. Push-ups, sit-ups, throwing, dodging, even a mock battle. The kid impressed him again, nonetheless. He lasted the whole 2 hours without complaining or rest. Sure, he wasn't perfect. His throwing was horrible and his taijutsu needed a lot of work, but the boy was fast, dodged well, and his stamina was high even for being a kid full of energy. Come his break, he had no choice but to uphold his end of the bargain. Bringing him to the academy, he noticed another thing he liked in the boy. He was focused. He passed the whole way to the ninja school in silence. Sure, he was looking around on both sides, but he went the distance in silence, even though Shiro was sure he had 100 questions. Once in the building he made his way to Iruka's door, and a single knock had the teacher opening the way to his office. Nokaru-san, what can I do to help you? Yumino-san, I have a child for you. Yumino Iruka was of the same genin class as he was, though contact between them had been rare after the time. They had gone in 2 much different ways, in the end. Shiro brought the boy forward. He is someone without parents, and has made his way here to be able to enroll as a ninja. I will take care of him, Yumino-san, someone said behind them. Turning around, both Shiro and Iruka noticed another chunin had joined them. The wall guard knew him well, having been in a team under his leadership at many a time during his genin days. I have no problem in doing his inscription, Hyojin-san, Iruka replied. You have already missed 2 days and are probably still late on your work, Hyojin Kiritori stated in his habitual neutral tone. While many found this peculiarity of his speech condescending, Shiro knew that this way just his way. He still sounded like an Aburame, though. Since my own preparatory work is complete, it is better for all that I take care of it. If you say so, Iruka relented. Good day then, Nokaru-san, Hyojin-san. He then retreated into his office. Both he and Murmuru followed the older instructor to the door of his own office, where said person turned to the boy. Can you wait for me in my office while I talk to Nokaru-san here? I won't be long. Sure, the boy said, leaving the two to their conversation. I didn't know you had asked for a job as an instructor, Shiro noted as soon as the boy was gone. Sandame-sama personally came to see me as soon as the debacle with Mizuki was over, he said, rare emotion entering his word as he spoke the traitor's name. It fit well with my plans, also. Your plans. I am getting old, Shiro. He said, sighing, and it was true. For a ninja, he was in his late 50s, past retirement age. And with what happened with the Kyuubi, I'm the last of my clan. But I swore to my father when he taught me our clan's style that I would do everything I could for it not to die. So I have been looking for the past 3 years for someone that could carry my legacy. A child I could train to be the next master of the sharp fist. And, nothing. I've looked at the last 3 graduating classes and all those with talent for taijutsu end up being clan members already using a specific style. And I won't let my clan's style be assimilated by another. What about this Rock Lee kid? Guys screaming to all corners that he's the next taijutsu master of Konoha. True, he has the potential, but my style needs chakra usage to be fully mastered. He unfortunately couldn't make the cut. He sighed again. He obviously cared about his style very much. It was the most emotion he'd seen in the man ever. Now, to come back to what I wanted to ask. Kiratori added, how did you come by the boy? You won't believe me. Do tell. He climbed the wall. He already knows how to use chakra. No, not that I know of. He climbed the old-fashioned way. Both were silent for a moment. That is impressive. He might be what you're looking for. He's got at least speed and endurance, and while his combat skills are nothing to write home about, it would at least allow you to start from scratch. I will see. What about his family? Either dead or having abandoned him. His face told me as much. Do you want me to put you as the boy's sponsor? Shiro thought for an instant. Why not? He deserves it for what I put him through. You need anything else from me? No. Then, I'll be leaving him in your capable hands while I return to the wall. Good day. Good day, the instructor said as the other ninja disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Entering his office he found the boy seated on the chair reserved to guest. Said child quickly turned around to look at him. I do not know if Shiro introduced me to you, so I will do so. My name is Hyojin Kiratori, and I will be the taijutsu instructor starting next session. The boy raised his hand. Yes, taijutsu. Combat with either the body or with weapons. Now, can I have your name? Murmuru. The Chunin wrote it down. Family name. The child's face tensed and lowered. I don't have any family. I am sorry if this causes you pain, but I need complete information to do your inscription. So your family name would be Joka. The boy's face didn't rise. Place of residence. None. The questions continued in the same vein for a good 30 minutes. It took a good 10 of those for the boy's eyes to get back up, but by the end he was smiling as if nothing had happened. Kiratori had learned a magic word to make the boy's spirit rise back up. Ninja. As Murmuru started in the physical evaluation that came with wanting to be a ninja, the Chunin couldn't help but notice exactly what his past subordinate had told him earlier. He had been right. This kid might have been the exact person he'd been waiting for. For Iruka, the day passed with agonizing slowness. He'd expected to be the one writing in both of Naruto's prank inscriptions into Konoha Academy, but couldn't find anything on the spot to oppose the words of the elder Chunin. And the worst was he was right. He was still late in his preparations. Worst was, Iruka had passed the whole afternoon juggling from supply notice to student annulations to weapon requisition form, all the while going at half his usual speed due to anxiety. And the knowledge of the problem did anything but help. Hyojin Kiratori, who'd been chosen by the Hokage to replace Mizuki, was something of a legend in the Chunin circles. A taijutsu specialist of high grade, while not on the level of Maida Gai, he was one of the few Chunin to be consistently given a rank missions. The rumor was he'd turned down the Jonin rank at least twice, for reasons unknown though, again, widely gossiped about. He was probably one of the top Chunin in Konoha. He was more than good enough to be able to see through disguises. So Iruka stressed continuously, expecting every second to have Naruto surge in telling him his prank had been seen through, or his college notifying him of an infiltration attempt. He nearly hit the ceiling when someone knocked on his door in the late afternoon. Kiratori came in right after that, and handed him the registration papers. While placing the various sheets in their respective folders, Iruka couldn't help himself but ask questions. So, what should I expect of our newest student? Probably a taijutsu specialist, his college answered. Full of energy, very focused. Iruka boggled internally at that. I have high hopes for the boy after he's unlocked usage of his chakra. However, his scores in the written evaluation are borderline, so you and Kazuhi might have issues with his work. All in all a good match for most students. Okay, Iruka answered. His concentration wasn't fully there, but he was glad that Naruto's plan was still underway without any great issue. Do you need me for anything else? The elder Chunin asked. Iruka quickly checked through the various papers he had been handed, verifying if they were complete. No, it seems everything is filled completely. You can go. I'll also be leaving as soon as this has been properly placed. I will see you tomorrow then. When Iruka entered Naruto's underground training facility, he was graced with the sight of something akin an all-out war. Each and every clone in sight was fighting each other. They were visibly restraining themselves, battling only using their fists, feet and kune. Iruka waited at the end of the tunnel he had taken, looking around, when he finally noticed what they were doing. They were training. They had some kind of technique Iruka didn't know, one that allowed them to block attacks with just about any part of their body. Just now the Chunin had seen a Naruto bat away a kunai with his head, all without bursting. It was pretty impressive. A single more minute allowed Iruka to find what he expected was the original Naruto. He was standing on one of the many rocky protuberances the place had, and was the only one not actively fighting. He also frequently summoned more cage bunchins, which is how the academy teacher had spotted him. Making his way there, Iruka marveled at the training. With the sheer amount of clones working, he'd gained mastery at a rate that was unbelievable. Jumping, when he landed right beside his most unpredictable pupil, he couldn't help but smile at the sight of him. Good evening, Naruto. Evening, Iruka. He did a quick look around. How did you manage to find the real me? Easy. First, you're not fighting. Second, I'm pretty sure your clones can't use cage bunchin as much as I've seen you use it. He scratched behind his head. Well, you caught me, he said, smiling. I'd like to talk to you, so, could we move someplace a little quieter, please? Sure, 1 second. Once more doing the specific hand sign necessary for his jutsu, the academy student called into being the largest wave of copies up to date. He then turned to the one closest to him. Pass the message. I want you clones to continue fighting until there's only a single one left, okay? Okay, the clone answered. A second later he was beset by kunai coming from various points, including the original. He managed to block the first 5, but the 6th turned him back into smoke. Let's go, Naruto then exclaimed. He led Iruka back into the room the Chunin had seen the last time he was here, however this time the council was absent and only the 2 of them were present. The Chunin did not wait a second and took a chair opposite his favorite student. So, is everything going fine? Naruto said as soon as his teacher was no longer standing. Yes, but I have a question first. What exactly was going on down there? Training. I'd noticed. What kind? A banned technique from the Scroll of Seals. It simply allows one to create a hard skin made of chakra to block. Why train in that one? You do know my clones will have to participate in whatever taijutsu training there will be during class, right? They'll need something like this simply to survive whenever we have free-for-all sparring. True, he hadn't thought about that possible solution. Iruka had been planning on keeping Naruto and or one of his clones for the taijutsu exercises, under various pretenses. Only one would be going, and that would have been the true Naruto under Hench. He was glad that the boy had found another way, as his plan was pretty risky. You should be more careful about training in those, you know. They were banned for a reason. Yeah, I know, but I'm pretty sure this one was mostly banned due to politics. Why would that be? It interferes with the Hyuga Jukin. Iruka whistled and nodded. He had to agree with the conclusion Naruto had come to. The Hyuga clan had much in the way of political power, and they were well known to oppose anything that limited the power of their style. Be careful anyway. No worries. My clones already went through every technique, removing those that were dangerous to me in any way, which didn't include anything related to chakra exhaustion, as Naruto was pretty sure it was impossible for him. He paused for an instant. Now, how went my latest clone's inscription? You probably know better than me. Iruka answered. Then how about we trade information? Asked Naruto. Perfect with me. Naruto then explained everything from climbing the wall to the moment when the academy teacher had left him, after applying and being given a budget as an orphaned academy student. Iruka added whatever comments Kiratori had given him. I have a question though. Iruka said at the end. Ask away. Kiratori-san said you were very focused. How? That's just the personality I decided for Mamoru. Is there any issue with that? Are you sure you won't have any problem keeping up that appearance during class? He waited an instant. Not to be insulting, but you aren't the most focused boy in the classroom. Are you sure you will be able to keep that appearance up? Sure, I can be focused when I want to. Remember the time with the tags? You know, the one 2 years ago. It took some time before Iruka remembered that specific moment, but he groaned once he did. After a week without pranks, Naruto had managed to put explosive tags in every single place Iruka could have thought of. Luckily those had been training tags issued for the academy, those being generally as strong as a simple firecracker. He'd even managed to chain them in specific ways, like those he'd used to make every single drawer in the room open abruptly before their contents exploded out. Iruka had to admit the level of focus necessary for such a prank was much more than he'd ever shown in class. Then, why didn't you show that focus in the academy? 'Cause it's boring. Those tests you give out, I've already done them. Most of those lectures I've already had. When I go to school, I want to be taught something new and useful, not something boring and useless. For the prank it won't be a problem, since it's for a prank, but the rest of the time it's not worth the effort. It's not like you're teaching any new ninjutsu, after all. Before Iruka could answer anything, a clone entered the room at high speed. Boss, you gotta come down here, he said. Why? The clones you sent to grass are back. And why didn't you use a clone to message me? We did. 3 times even. You just didn't receive it seems. The Naruto copy answered. While Iruka followed Naruto back down, he was thinking about the speech Naruto had given him. He had to agree that any kid having to do the same thing twice wouldn't be interested the second time. And most exams were similar in most points. There had to be a way of making it more interesting. Once back into his training room before the delegation sent to grass, Naruto waited no time. Back already? Yup, the lead bunchin answered. Didn't I tell you to message once you were there? You did and we did. It's the first time we heard that a message didn't come through. I think it's because we're starting to have too many clones. Probably something to do with multiple clones dispersing at the same time. Troublesome, the original said, copying Shikimaru. Anyway, how did you manage to get from here to grass and back in less than a week? We found something, boss. The bunchin waited a moment. You know the problems we have with the replacement technique. The real Naruto, along with most of the clones standing around him, nodded. Well, it's all a matter of distance. The farther we move with the technique, the easier it is. Impossible, Iruka interrupted. The replacement technique may not have set limits, but anything beyond 100 meters can't be done. Want to bet? The clone answered. He pointed towards one of the many rocky spires rising from the ground. How far would you estimate that spike to be? The Chunin looked carefully. 300 to 400 meters, at least. Look hard. The clone did the required hand signs in a flash, and a large rock took its place. Turning around, Iruka saw that it had switched itself exactly the distance it had said, and was now standing and waving from the top of said rock. A second later, he was back, having replaced himself back with the same stone. Enough proof for you, he said, smirking. Iruka nodded, in shock. The replacement technique was E-rank, and the idea that someone could move so far on so little chakra was preposterous. You'd need to overload the jutsu incredibly too. The gears started turning into the Chunin's mind. Unless you overload the jutsu, such distances were impossible. In all the techniques Naruto knew, some were impossible to overload, like Cage Bunshin, while he had issues with every single technique from the academy, which took very little chakra. Except the transformation technique, but since his was different from any other it might be much more demanding in term of chakra. Hey Iruka, Naruto asked. The Chunin waved his student into silence. Gathering all his reserves, he tried doing exactly what he had asked for the last exam at the academy, 2 normal Bunshins. Only this time, he wanted to overload them as much as possible. Going through the needed hand signs, he channeled as much chakra as he could in the technique, all the while limiting himself to 2 clones. Said clones appeared. They were, however, similar to the last 2 normal clones Naruto had summoned. Their skin was clammy and they were visibly sick, and vanished less than 2 seconds after appearing. I finally understand, Iruka finally said, breathing hard. Why the normal clones didn't work for you. All the Narutos turned towards him in unison. Why? It wasn't lack of effort, as I'd thought, but too much effort. You were putting too much chakra in the technique, and that's why it always failed. Oh, they all answered. That's good that we finally found out, the teacher added. Especially since your 2 clones in the academy have to be proficient in that technique, especially if you want them to stand out for you. Right, the true Naruto said, while all others fell silent. It took a few minutes before he turned back to the group coming for grass. So, since I didn't receive the message, how did it go with Aikibo? Here, the leader of the clone group said, tossing him the scroll. You need to summon this guy. Japanese translations. Shiro Nokuru. Shiro, Sheung Castle Nokuru. To remain. Hyojin Kiratori. Hyojin Bing Ren, sharp. Glistening sword Kiratori. Cutting, tearing off, cutting off, clipping. Joka, Joka, Joker. To those who thought I had abandoned this story, I tell you I will not. I have everything planned up until the end of the first part, and you can be sure we will get there. I promise also you won't have to wait another year before getting the next part of the story. Anyway, to all of you reading, have a happy new year. 8. Final preparations. A drop of poison. Chapter 7. Final preparations. Disclaimer. Naruto belongs to Kishimoto. Ramen belongs to Naruto. Enough said. Here, the leader of the clone group said, tossing him the scroll. You need to summon this guy. Catching the scroll, Naruto eyed it carefully. After the debacle with the crab, he was more careful with summoning than he'd been before. Who is it supposed to summon? The boss of the rabbits. Thinking a few moments, the original student answered. Why don't you go over what happened since you left? The clone group did so, each speaking in turn to complete what the previous had started, which made the conversation difficult to follow. Not helping was the fact that the various explanations sparked some memories inside Naruto. He evidently remembered some form of what happened, but not consciously. Fortunately, or unfortunately, this wasn't the time to dwell on such things. So, in short, the blonde ninja said, once the explanation was winding down. The guy this thing summons is the one who'll decide if we make the cut or not, true. The group of Bunshin nodded. What do you think, sensei? Iruka jolted out of his thoughts at that phrase. Sorry Naruto, I wasn't paying attention. You were saying, he asked. Said boy quickly gave a quick description of the various discussions with and about the rabbit summons for his teacher. Iruka was originally appalled at the risks his student had taken, but couldn't argue with the results. So, what do you think? Naruto added, seeing that the Chunin was still pondering what he had said. After a few seconds of not finding any point to argue, the teacher nodded. I can't find any reason not to summon this rabbit leader of yours. I doubt it could be a trap, and even then the sheer number of clones would pretty much ensure an escape. Just don't be afraid to run if it gets dangerous. Also, prepare a large space. I've heard that some of the boss summons are quite large. The Bunshins started moving at said words. Okay, can I stay here and watch? I've never seen any of the boss summons, so it would be a learning experience for me also. No problem, his student answered, unrolling the scroll on the ground before him. He then took one of his kunai, slashed open a finger and spread the blood in a line in a smooth motion. The scroll reacted instantly, consuming itself while emitting copious smoke. It, however, quickly dispersed, and the rabbit boss was now standing there. For all Iruka had said rabbit wasn't large at all. He was 1 or 2 inches taller than the Chunin, and was standing in a similar way as any human. He wasn't wearing much, but was covered with pale gray fur. His only accoutrements were a leather strap holding a bag full of staves in his back, and a pair of black gloves with steel plates made for his animal hands. As soon as his eyes opened, he fixed Naruto with a stare. Naruto stood there, impassive. After a full minute where Naruto stood still while Iruka stressed but refrained from moving, the summon lifted his stare. The pressure that had been there evaporated in an instant. The rabbit sniffed, then smiled. I can see you're something special, Kit. Naruto relaxed at those words, and smiled. It was the shy smile Iruka saw rarely, like the time he'd given the boy the money for his prank. He relaxed also. I am Nanabo-o, leader of the rabbit summons, and Aikibo has interceded in favor of you signing the rabbit contract. The non-human figure did any few seals, which seemed bizarre considering his hands, and two other rabbits appeared. One was a little shorter than Naruto, was wearing clothes similar to those of a samurai with two swords hanging from his side, and had his ears tied together. The other was a normal rabbit, the same size as Aikibo had been. It had two weapons consisting of two differently sized short blades on wooden handles hanging somehow on his back. Both were pure white. These two will be the ones testing you, the summon leader said before turning to his subordinates. Miyamoto, test his ability at surviving first with Monty, then his ability to learn. Yes, master, said Rabbit replied, bowing. During the time I'll look around the city with you, he added, looking at Iruka. Is that okay with you? Iruka, who had been up until now a spectator, was surprised at his inclusion in the plans. I don't see why I couldn't. He answered. Good, the animal boss added. Why can't we wait until I'm done with the tests, and we all go together? Naruto said, his tone a little whining. Iruka held back a sigh. Sorry Kit, but we'll probably end up in a bar somewhere, and I don't think you're cleared for alcohol yet. Naruto pouted but didn't argue. As soon as the two tallest of the group left, Naruto turned back toward the one dressed as a warrior. So, how are those tests going to be? First, Uzumaki-san, as you have heard, Monty here. The rabbit pointed down to the smallest of the group. Will test your ability to survive. How? He will fight you. Your goal is not to defeat him but to survive. That's all. No limited techniques. Yes, Uzumaki-san. It will be much more difficult than you expect, I gather. The rabbit paused for a second. Are you ready? Naruto twisted his neck twice in preparation. Sure. Monty, non-lethal. Go, said Rabbit blurred. The rabbit crossed the few meters separating them in an eye blink, and saw the two weapons bare inches from his face a fraction of a second before reality blinked. Disoriented, the academy student quickly realized what had happened the moment a clone's memories surged in his mind, accompanied by the sound of an uncorking bottle. A clone had switched with him at the last instant, saving his neck. Hearing something rushing towards him, he switched again, this time landing on the farthest pillar from his point of origin. By now the clones had realized what was going and were once again trying to attack in mass, though the only result was the rhythmic sounds of uncorking bottles as said clothes were decapitated. Seeing his bunchins going down at high speed, he quickly created a new batch, 2 to 300 before switching again. This time he didn't wait, and as soon as he appeared he called out, Raiton, knowing his clones would get the meaning. And they did. A second later too many flashes to count filled the room. Naruto was happy to hear that the dreadful popping sound stopped at that instant. And restarted a second later, once again coming closer. Naruto switched while swearing in his head. How did that bunny track him? As soon as he reappeared, the death of a clone gave him a good idea. Sound. Noise. He cried out, right before switching. This time it took a longer for the clones to catch on, but they quickly did. One by one, they all started making noise. Some clapped their hands or stomped the ground. Some started singing, some yelling, some whistling. A few even started telling jokes. The effect, however, was immediate. The rabbit no longer tracked him unerringly, and started eliminating the clones closest to him instead. It then became a stalemate, with Monty eliminating clones as quickly as Naruto created them. After a full minute of this, the samurai rabbit Miyamoto had enough. Monty, stop. As soon as those words were uttered the small summon was back where he had been originally, as if he'd never moved. Naruto, on his side, switched back before the two rabbits, breathing a little hard. Good enough showing, I suppose. The samurai said. Monty, unmoving, said nothing. Overtaken by curiosity, Naruto couldn't help but ask. Does he talk? He never did, to my knowledge, Miyamoto answered. I am not even sure his true name is Monty. He does answer to it, however. He paused for a second. Can I ask a question? Sure. Why did you not flee using your technique? Survival was the goal, not defeat. This, the blonde needed to ponder. It took him a few moments before he came up with an answer. I didn't really think about the option. My main goal was to deal with his speed and tracking ability. I don't think I could have done that while dodging him in a narrow corridor, he finally replied. A valid answer. Now for the second test. The rabbit paused. Have you been trained in the way of the sword? No. Perfect. Now if you can get something to train with, be it a sword, bakudo, shinai. The samurai enumerated, his eyes closed. The clone closest to the exit disappeared for a second, only to reappear a few seconds later beside Naruto loaded with dozen of sword-like weapons. Sheath, a thin plank, a cane, even a branch would do. He finished, finally looking at Naruto, who was in the process of selecting a katana. Miyamoto choked a little. Those will be fine, I think. Now take your sword like this, he instructed, demonstrating with his own sword. And take this position. Monty, still looking, stood there silently. The summon named Nanabo had not lied. He'd entered the first bar Iruka had pointed out and had gotten them a private booth. He had been helped by the fact that he'd hidden his natural appearance under a genjutsu that, to the Chunin's eyes, was flawless. He was now, outside his gray hair and eyes, a totally forgettable person. He'd ordered a strawberry liqueur for himself, while Iruka took a simple Konoha beer. As soon as they received their orders, the bunny leader stepped up. Now that we have drink, let's get to the real reason we're here. Which is, I want you to describe me your student, Naruto. Why me? You could have asked him. Yes, but a herd knows its members well. A friend knows even better. A person might underplay or overplay his own abilities, but a real friend would not. So, tell me about this boy who wants to summons the rabbits. Well, how could I describe him? He's someone very friendly and energetic. And loyal also. He tends however to be very lonely, and keeps his emotions to himself. He's much brighter than he looks, and can think outside the box at the best of times. Iruka was ticking down fingers. Sadly, he's not one for the usual school environment, and I have much difficulty having him focus on his classes. Between that and his pranking, he makes the academy interesting, to say the least. So he's a prankster, the rabbit said, smiling. The Chunin did not notice, stuck in reminiscence. The very worst. Not a month ago he painted graffiti over the carving of the previous Hokages, he pointed out. Over the face of your leaders. Yes. Wahahaha. Nanabo couldn't help himself and laughed heartily. He can see he's a handful. Yes. Apart from that, the academy teacher became more reticent. He hasn't really been treated properly. How come? Well, he's an orphan. And no one cared enough to adopt him. He's been alone since forever. And doesn't make friends easily. Iruka was silent after that, not wanting to get into dangerous territory. It seemed, however, to be painting a good enough picture for the Rabbit King. That's all fine and good, but there's one thing missing. What's the link between him and foxes? Iruka tried not to react. He really did, but even the partial stumble was damning enough for the creature in front of him. You know, he said. I can't say anything, the Chunin replied. Wait, this is Konoha, right? That would mean. Then Iruka's eyes filled with fear. He was watching a train wreck in slow motion, but was powerless to stop it. Wahahaha. Laughter. That wasn't what he'd expected. The foxes will be trying to one-up us for centuries after that. He kept on laughing. The teacher didn't understand anything anymore. Explain, please. His voice was fierce, but his companion didn't seem to be offended. It took a few seconds for Nanabo to get his breath back. The fact is, generally, the relationships between animal summons emulate those of the animal they represent. That's why the snake and frog courts have always been opposed. One is naturally prey to the other. It would normally be the same between rabbit and foxes, if not for one thing, we are both known to be trickster spirits. Okay, so that makes the relations between us two more like rivals than actual enemies. Our fights are pranks we do one another or occasionally on other animals. Iruka motioned to continue. Added to that is the fact that the foxes were always somewhat proud that the Kyuubi was a fox. They didn't like its methods at all, but it was the strongest, and it was a fox. Nanabo smiled. And now the vessel for the Kyuubi, who the fox court would have given their tail to have, is asking to be a member of the rabbit court. Wahahaha. He started laughing again. The laughter was quite a bit hysterical and Iruka couldn't help but smile. It was, he had to admit, a reaction he hadn't seen coming. And he understood. That was the worst. It really doesn't bother you. The Chunin had to ask. What, you really think that the mighty Kyuubi would want to sign the rabbit contract? He started on laughter even more hysterical than previous. Iruka himself released a bark of laughter at the image of the Kyuubi, great destroyer taller than Konoha, trying to sign a scroll not even 2 feet large. It took a while before the laughter died down, and Nanabo took the opportunity to finish his glass. Well then, the kids got my vote at least. I haven't laughed that hard since I glued bunny ears to the foxes and stopped them from realizing with genjutsu. Iruka smiled at the image of rabbit-eared foxes. It was pretty evident that this guy and Naruto would get along famously. One last thing then before we go back. He once again did a number of hand seals, though they were recognizable this time. A small black rabbit with a staff popped on the bench beside the bunny leader. Yo, Cage, it said. Cage? Iruka asked, curious. Ever since he learned that the ninja leaders are called cages, he's been calling me such. He's been wanting to be a ninja ever since he knew the definition of the word. He paused. Aikibo. Yes. On the matter of the swearing of Naruto Uzumaki, what is your vote? Nanabo said, solemnly. I vote yes. Additionally, I would be proud to be a member of his battle herd and to serve as his Beauregard. The black rabbit answered head down but voice straight. Nanabo was visibly surprised. You sure? With my life. The rabbit leader thought for a moment before nodding. Well, you always wanted to be outside, so this is your chance. Thank you. The smaller rabbit bowed deeply. Iruka had held up asking questions not to interrupt what was visibly an important moment, but now couldn't resist asking. So, what was all that? Okay, to explain, someone's battle herd is the group that accompanies one in battle, only to a greater degree. The closest thing that comes to mind in human terms is, brother of war. A Beauregard, however, is an honorary position given to a rabbit who guards, at all time, the burrow of an important person, such as an expecting mother or revered elder. Basically, what Aikibo meant was that he would accompany Naruto everywhere and fight with him. He paused for a second. You are his teacher, correct? Yes. Aikibo, in addition to convincing Naruto, I want this man agreement before anything is finalized. Now, Iruka had seen 2 years of academy students, and considered himself pretty resistant to the various puppy dog eyes he had faced in his career. Naruto was one of the rare children who still had an effect on him, and that was mostly due to their similar lives than anything. He considered it a point of pride that he had stood firm before those of an actual puppy, as Kiba had trained Akamaru to produce the effect on demand. Akamaru had nothing on Aikibo. Well, the teacher found himself answering. The Inuzuka do have their dogs. I can't really say no. The small rabbit started hopping and dancing madly on the table, saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. All the while, well, Nanabo added, now that this is done, how about we see how our prospective summoner is doing? Let's, Iruka said, rising, now third, then fifth. No, not like that, keep your weapon straight. Yes, better, Miyamoto said as Naruto followed his instructions. That was the sight that greeted Iruka and the two rabbits Aikibo was riding on his leader's shoulders. Nanabo was back to his normal self, having removed the genjutsu as soon as they had gotten in the tunnels. So, how is our young ninja? The rabbit leader exclaimed as soon as he entered Naruto's underground lair. The samurai waited until his master, along with Iruka, had rejoined him near the training kid before responding, he can be taught. He is not particularly talented with the sword, but has great endurance and doesn't shy from training. Good, good. And your vote? I vote yes. Monty, standing silent and near, thumped the ground once. Yes, the rabbit leader answered. The small bunny thumped once again, this time with both paws, then twice in quick succession. You sure? He hit the ground once again. Okay. So, with 4 votes out of the requisite 3, the rabbit leader intoned very ceremonially. Naruto Uzumaki, you have been cordially accepted as a member of the rabbit clan. Now there are only 3 steps left. First, do you swear to follow the rules of the rabbit clan? To never be without children, to never let the clan die out, and to never let one's knowledge be forgotten. Yes, Naruto answered, standing ramrod straight. Second, the rabbit king said, motioning to Aikibo that was standing on his shoulder. This one has something to ask. Said animal jumped down, coming to stand in front of the academy student. Uzumaki-san, I would like to accompany you as you go about your life. I will help you, guard you and fight with you as necessary. I'll train you and train with you, so that both of us would be the best we can. He bowed low. Please accept this selfish request, Uzumaki-san. I will do my best to be worthy of you. Naruto didn't know what to answer. He wasn't even sure if he'd understood properly. It sounded too good to be true. He instinctively turned towards Iruka for clarification. Basically, he wanted to be to you as Akamaru as to Kiba. You understand now. The Chunin responded to the unspoken question. Slowly, Naruto broke into a wide smile. He bent down as much as possible, just to tower less over the still bowing rabbit. Sure, Aikibo head rose in a flash. One thing, though, I'm Naruto, so call me that. No Uzumaki-san or something like that, okay. Said rabbit nodded while jumping up and down, then leapt to Naruto's shoulder and started nuzzling him in the neck. Both Iruka and Nanabo let the scene go on without any interruptions. Iruka knew how much Naruto needed acceptance from others, and suspected something similar in Aikibo. He was glad Naruto had someone else than the Hokage and himself, even if that person was a rabbit. He suspected a similar train of thought was going through the elder rabbit's head. Third, Nanabo intoned after the new duo had a few minutes to regain composure. The signing of the scroll. He once again made a string of hand signs, and another rabbit popped right in front of him. This one was a little taller than Miyamoto, twice as large, and covered in armor plates. Said scroll was hanging on the summon's belly. It handed the scroll to the rabbit leader on the instant it appeared. Nanabo wasted no time unrolling it, and after a few meters he had a blank spot handy to place in front of Naruto. Now, to sign this scroll and confirm your contract with the rabbits, you need to place a handprint in blood of each of your hands on the paper, then to write down your name the same way below them. What's with the other names? They're all smudged and unreadable. That's what happens when a summoner dies, the rabbit leader answered. The scroll is special and keeps the blood fresh, but it's the user's chakra that keeps the blood legible. Meaning that upon a summoner's death, the blood runs and makes its signature impossible to read. Cutting open his own palm with a kunai, Naruto used the blood there to wet his hands. That means there isn't any other rabbit summoner left, right? Right. Naruto wasted no time placing the handprints and writing down his name, knowing from experience that the cut he had made wouldn't bleed for long. As soon as he was done, Nanabo re-rolled the scroll for storage and handed it to its original carrier, which disappeared as soon as it was back in place. Miyamoto, Monty, we will be leaving also, the elder summon said. Miyamoto nodded, bowed, and disappeared in a puff of smoke. Turning to Naruto, Nanabo smiled. I expect you to summon me again in a week to see how much you improved, partner. He handed Naruto his paw with a grin. Naruto shook it gratefully. I will, partner, he said, smiling. Take good care of my grandson, then. And then he too vanished. Monty then followed suit an instant later. Naruto turned to Aikibo in a flash. Grandson. Sorry we're late, said the two clones disguised as civilian children. They quickly took their places around the council table. Good, the original ninja exclaimed, clapping his hands together. Aikibo, standing upon Naruto's head, was looking around confusion. Now we can begin. As you know from various clone memories, this little guy is Aikibo, one of the rabbit summons, and the newest part of our council. Aikibo, this is the prank council, the group where we Naruto's plan and decide upon what should be done. And this works with all of you being the same person. Aikibo asked, visibly confused. You'll see, replied the bunchin known as Murmuru. So, now that we're all there. Status report. I've finished both furnishing my place and buying the remaining ninja supplies we don't have in abundance, Iruka said, showing her kunoichi outfit as proof of her words. I also have 3 clones currently studying the required book, since my cover includes being better on the theoretical side than the other 2. Good, good, Murmuru. I unfortunately haven't started on studying, but I've been given today the apartment I'll be using while in the academy. The group nodded. Some secondhand stuff has also been delivered to me by the Chunin who tested me. Mostly old ninja stuff. I'll be going through it as soon as I go back out. Okay, how about you two? Naruto asked, pointing to the two civilian latecomers. Not as good on our side. We entered Konoha late today and haven't managed to find the person holding the deed for the shop we've been thinking of using, the female copy answered. The two other clones are also busy filling the various papers we need to live in Konoha legally. How come none of the others had to fill such papers? One of the clones looking like Naruto asked. Personally, I believe that those are part of the documents Iruka and that other teacher, Kiratori, filled for us, the Naruto disguised as a civilian boy replied. There's also quite a bit of red tape added with the various permits for shopkeepers and traders being involved. I guess that means you've decided on what names to use, correct? The real Naruto asked, looking in turn toward each of the civilians. Yup, I'm Jisei Kumori, the female one said, and I'm her brother, Jisei Kokue. Our father is Janae and our mother, Ane, her brother continued. Perfect. Kokue, Kumori, remember to update everyone via clone about this selection. The two nodded while Naruto went on. The fact that you guys are not up to schedule isn't that bad, your placement isn't as time sensitive as the one of the two ninja bunshin. Now, unless there's an emergency, this will be the last council meeting before the academy opens. So, we need to make sure everything is as perfect as we can make it. We can't be meeting every day as we did before or it'll draw too much attention. The whole council nodded. So, first thing, techniques. I'd like your opinion on what we should focus on, the real academy student asked. You think we have a good enough mastery of the chakra shield, one of the undisguised clones said. I have to agree, another added. We need to at least have a few others working on new jutsu. Let's put it to the vote, the original concluded. The vote was unanimous, and further bargaining split the clones' training in half, with one continuing work on the shielding technique while the other would go back to the 5 remaining elemental jutsu they'd originally selected. Okay, one down. Second point, the clones outside. We need at least one person to take care of that. That includes everything. Maps, numbers, what we can buy and sell, etc. I won't be able to take care of that, since I'll be back to the academy soon, so I'd like for volunteers. 3 of the clones raised their hands. Good, then I'm leaving that in your hands. We'll expect a report at the next meeting, though, the female civilian added. No prob, the first of the 3 replied, while the others nodded. Last thing then, Naruto continued. Aikibo, that's you, said Rabbit jumped down to the council table. What can I do for you, Naruto? I've been thinking and I think you should go with Iruka for the classes. Why? I'd much rather stay with the real you. I know, but the fact is, when classes start, if you stay with me, I'll need to explain your presence. Naruto sighed, clearly unhappy with the fact. And I can't. You're visibly not from Konoha and, as an academy student and orphan, I'm not supposed to have been far outside the village. The council nodded sadly. Iruka, though, can explain your presence as something your father bought you as an acceptance present or something. Aikibo hit the table twice with a paw. That's only starting with the academy, right? Right. Then okay, but I'm staying with the real you until then. The rabbit rose to stand on his 2 hind paws. I meant what I said earlier. I'm staying by you. He then jumped straight into Naruto's hair. Fine by me, he said with a smile. He then looked around the table at the various clones present. If there isn't anything else. Rising, the various bunchins shook their heads in answer. Then this meeting is done. The council will meet again after the first day of school. He concluded while putting his seat back into place. The various Narutos each went back to their own work. Again, the clone names follow an obvious pattern, as can be seen in the Japanese translations below. Ane, Anying, shadow, gloom. Janae, Renying, figure, shadow of a person. Kokue, Heiying, silhouette, dark shadow. Kumori, cloudiness, cloudy weather, shadow. Jisei, Niji, imitation, forgery, copy. Also, this chapter is the last before Naruto returns to the academy. Be ready next time to see the prank going live. Pages S. I'll be doing a fanfiction panel at Otakuthan 2010, in Montreal, on Friday, August 13th at 6 p.m. Anybody with questions, comments is welcome to ask them after the panel. 9. Back to school. A drop of poison. Chapter 8. Back to school. Disclaimer. Naruto belongs to Kishimoto. Ramen belongs to Naruto. Enough said. Tatsujin Hiroshi. Present. Uzumaki Naruto. Here. Karakara. Said student raised her hand. Murmuru. Hi. Perfect. Now, both as your primary instructor and as your ninjutsu teacher, I welcome you all to this year at the Konoha Ninja Academy. For all of you new students, my name is Yumino Iruka and teaching ninjutsu is my specialty. To those of you returning for another year here, my job is to iron out whatever deficiencies you have and make you all better ninjas. Said teacher looked around as most of the class nodded. A quick look around revealed easily the state of the class. Bigger than the previous one, which was somewhat unexpected. It was the first class whose starting student would have been born for sure after the QB. The lack of members from preeminent shinobi families was also telling. Since none of the clan-born students from the previous year had failed to pass, there was only a branch Hyuga and a male member of the Kurama family currently in the room. As for returners, there were 10, Naruto not included. That was higher than average and a good thing in the Chunin's mind, as Konoha needed the manpower. Now, I'd like for everyone returning for a new year to raise their hands. There's no shame in that, as there's always more students graduating than Jonin available for mentoring. One by one the returners raised their hands. Naruto also did, and Iruka was proud of the fact that none of his other selves even twitched. It probably had helped that this wasn't the first time he'd gone through this ritual. To those who are in their first attempt, these are the students who have a good clue on how to proceed. I'll try to make myself available as much as possible, but unfortunately there's only one of me. If I'm too busy or I'm out of reach, ask around. I'm pretty sure you can find someone who can help you in this class. Only a few nodded this time. Murmuru, the male Naruto clone, was one of them, but not the female one. Now, another show of hands. Outside those who are returning, raise your hand if any of you have already had some kind of official ninja instruction. A good half of the class responded, with Iruka as one of them. Which meant, those who haven't. Only 6 people had their hands up, Murmuru included. He nodded. There's no shame in any of this, either. I personally was barely trained before coming to the academy, and I'm the one teaching you now. The most important thing each of you needs is effort. As long as you train hard and study hard, passing the required exams will be a certainty. As long as you don't have some kind of birth defect like Rock Lee, he mentally added. Now, as I said before, I'll be teaching you ninjutsu, and general ninja knowledge along with that. We'll be seeing each other every morning, along with. 2 small thumps in her hair said it all. Incoming. What a cute bunny. Where did you find it? The Naruto clone known as Iruka turned to the side to find 5 girls right beside her. One was looking at her face, but all the rest were cooing over Ikibo who was in his customary place sitting upon her head. So that's what he meant. She mused. I didn't. My father bought it for me as an acceptance present. Lucky you. The lead girl, and the only one who had looked at Ariko's face, cried out. I only wished my father was as generous as yours. She brought out her hand out of her pocket to shake. Suzuki Fumishi, Mori Nishi, Hayabashi Asano, Okita Mihoshi, and Kimura Ringo, Joden Iruka, and the little guy upstairs is Ikibo. It had been cleared with him. Iruka could use his real name. From what he said, it had been more than 15 years since he'd been summoned, anyway. Can he do anything? Asano said. I don't know. The Bunchan answered. She wasn't supposed to be much of a ninja, yet. My father said he was a ninja bunny, though. A ninja bunny. Where did he get it? Somewhere in grass, I think. One left front leg thump. Yes, he agrees. How? Asked Mihoshi. He seems to understand everything quite normally. She pointed toward the rabbit. Ikibo, say yes again. Said rabbit once again hit the clone's head with his left front paw. How intelligent, responded Fumishi. The rest were also looking at the animal in obvious awe. The other paws no. That's pretty much all he does, for now. That was quite false. The real Naruto had been working with Ikibo near full time since the last council meeting on silent communication. It wasn't up to the point of actual language, but by combining thumps from all 4 legs with specific noises, the rabbit could pass simple messages to the clone, or ninja, working as his perch. Naruto's side of the bargain was all in the fingers, snapping some either in the air or against the other hand. So, what does your father do? Said Ringo. Merchant. She answered instantly. They had been part of her persona's setup. What kind? Asked Nishi. That hadn't. Iruka answered the first thing that came to mind. Clothing. She had been looking at the pattern on the lead girl's clothes at that time. Like your kunoichi outfit. No, civilian clothing. She'd bought her outfit in Konoha, so couldn't say that it was from her father. He's rarely in Konoha, actually. Why? Most of his work is in grass. We live on this side of the border with it, but that's where he does most of his sales. Then why did you come here, instead of grass? Said the leading girl. Father doesn't hold the ninjas there in high esteem, from what I can tell. He prefers dealing with those from Konoha instead. All the girls smiled in pride at their village. You will have your father bring some of his best stuff, won't you? Said Asano. But, Iruka answered. Yeah, I wanna see the top fashions of grass, added Mihoshi. I'm sure they are better than the boring ones we see every day in Konoha. Wait, come on, it'll be fun, completed the apparent leader of the group. By the time lunch was over, Ariko's cover was as near foolproof as it could have been. However, the girls had managed to wheedle out of Iruka the promise of a show featuring his father's wares. Naruto had also learned one thing about women, that she'd preferred having known before making that decision about her father. Never get between women and fashion. Ikibo, on his side, had passed the majority of said time hitting the back of the female clone's head with the digits of his left hind paw, all while purring. Meaning, in their language, I am laughing at this situation. Well, good for him. Good day students. My name is Hyojin Kiratori and I will be teaching you both taijutsu and weapon throwing. The Chunin said in his usual even tone. We will usually have 2 periods together, one before lunch and one before leaving for the day. The class nodded. First, I will evaluate you, to see where you stand and what to fix. Please split into 2 groups, with those who have already gone through a year at this academy on one side and the rest on the other. The class split itself as asked, and the teacher started with those returning. He did each person in the group before coming to Naruto. Only a person who would have known Kiratori for a long time could have noticed the very slight tightening of the eyes the man had upon coming to stand beside the bearer of the Kyuubi's seal. You have already done more than a single year in the academy, have you not? Yes, Naruto said, standing ramrod straight under the man's intense gaze. He hadn't been that way with Murmuru, but now the blonde boy found his teacher quite intimidating. Show me the first kata of the academy style, then. It took a moment for Naruto to remember what that meant, but he wasted no time once he did. He performed it just as Mizuki had taught it. Horrible. Watch me, the man answered. Said person performed the kata. Naruto quickly picked up quite a few differences that made the exercise much more fluid than he'd ever seen before. Now, can you repeat what I just did? Kiratori said once he was done. Naruto did, to the best of his ability. It visibly wasn't enough. Bring your left foot towards the right. The man said as he performed the exercise. Shift your center of balance a little lower. Extend less in the third movement. The sixth must start lower. Now, repeat that kata while fixing those holes until I tell you otherwise. And trust me, if you stop. The Chunin lowered his face right next to that of his student. I will know. Naruto started over again, trying to fix the mistakes pointed out, while the teacher went to the other group. Iruka was one of the first to pass on her side. The Chunin was much less cold and rigid with her, but had her practicing the first kata nonetheless. He did physically help her in the placement of her limbs, however. As Kiratori came to Murmuru, the teacher found the boy already performing the first kata. Near perfectly, even. Very good, the man said, with a very slight smile upon his lips. It was good to have his hopes confirmed. The only issue I see is a block an inch too high on the seventh movement. Murmuru redid the whole thing, this time perfectly. His teacher nodded. Try this one then. And he launched himself in the second kata of the Academy Taijutsu. He then left Murmuru to his own devices, continuing with the other students. By the time the first part of the class was done, Murmuru was up to the fourth kata, while most had started on the second. The teacher hadn't let Naruto move on from the first, however. Uzumaki Naruto, said boy straightened from his seat. What had he done now? Don't think I haven't noticed the message you just passed. Did you think that since this was the first day, I wouldn't notice? Kazuhi, the maths and history teacher, yelled out. You will put the cap as always and go stand in the corner as usual, he added, as some students started laughing at the blonde's predicament. You will stay there facing the wall until the end of the class, when I will find a suitable punishment for you. Naruto, now in the corner, sighed. This was pretty much life as usual in this class. Nearly every day Kazuhi found an excuse to send him in the corner, and continued the class as if nothing happened. A few students always snickered at him, but they went unpunished, while he would join anybody in the corner if he did the same. The man was a master of double standards, visibly. Worse was that the Chunin was a teacher who wrote out his lesson on the board instead of explaining orally, so the punishment meant he missed nearly an entire class each time this happened. It might just have been Kazuhi's way of teaching, but Naruto was pretty much persuaded that the man went that way just to hinder him as much as possible. A class like that was always long, and he'd learned that the punishment was always worse if he didn't wait for the teacher to acknowledge the end of the class before leaving the corner. When he did, however, the man was waiting for him. As always. As punishment, since this isn't your first offense. First this year, maybe, but not in total. You will write down, I will not bother other students until I come back. You will unfortunately, and his face visibly showed that he didn't find it unfortunate at all. Be missing your next class. I will be back after the teacher's meeting, and I'll keep you here if I find you haven't written enough. Is that understood? Naruto nodded, grinding his teeth. Good. I will see you later. He then left the class. Naruto nearly tossed the stick of chalk in his hand at the teacher in retaliation, but stopped himself when a better idea came to mind. Yes, so room and board in exchange for help serving the customers 5 days a week, is that correct? Said a Naruto bunchin in the shape of a mousy brown-haired girl of 17. You got it, girl. Answered the owner of the restaurant, an heavy-set tanned man in his 30s. Deal then, the clone said, bringing his hand forward. They shook on it, and the clone was shown to her room. It was small, a little smaller than Naruto's original bedroom, but it would do. There already was a bed and a desk, and she would eat downstairs in the restaurant itself. More than enough. She was the third clone in this city, which happened to be the grass capital. She was the only girl, and the two previous already had jobs, one in a building in construction and the other at a caravan dock. They made more money than her, even including her easy access to food, but were pretty much in the same situation as she was. As she was straightening her bed, a burst of memories came through her head. This was bizarre, as the original had instituted a near-complete memory exchange silence during the hours where the three main clones were in school, with only urgent messages being transmitted. It was the first message since classes started, so she wondered what it would be. Then she laughed. Laughing at one's own mistakes and at falling prey to pranks had become a necessary survival skill to clones, as cage bunchins pranking each other meant that one would get both sides of the deal. Laughing at one's own misfortune came soon after, as sometimes one got the pre's side long before the pranksters. So she laughed, all the while thinking of how to fulfill the expectations of those Konoha girls. She had passed a few clothing stores on the way, but hadn't paid much attention. This time she would, and hopefully a clone in Konoha would do the same. It wouldn't do not to have a point of comparison. Iruka stepped in the academy's meeting room a little anxious. This was make it or break it day for Naruto and his clones, and his mind had sent him treacherous images of meetings where the other teachers spoke of infiltration assignments, and guessed at which village was the cause. He hoped it was only his creativity playing with him and not some kind of premonition. He was quickly joined by both Kazuhi and Kiratori, the first smiling and the second as impassible as usual. As head teacher, it was his job to open the discussion, so he did. We have 36 students this year, the first full class since my arrival in the academy's service. Any issue with specific students? None whatsoever, answered the taijutsu teacher. I've tested just about every student in both throwing and academy kata, and can see no problems with the students as of now. It is of course too early to tell if any have specific issues that will need to be resolved, but everything is as it should for now. Good. Iruka nodded. That is exactly what I wanted to hear. That is, no issue with the clones. How about you, Kazuhi? Nothing unusual. The Uzumaki boy was once again disturbing the peace by passing messages, and is being punished for it right now, he said, then turned towards Kiratori. You did receive the message I had sent to you, correct? Correct, Kiratori answered. Iruka found it bizarre that Naruto would do such a thing, especially since his usual partners in crime, Kiba and Shikamaru, were no longer in class. I will note this in the boy's record. After he'd confirmed it with said boy, of course. Anything else? Kiratori answered no in a movement of his head. The maths teacher, however, was more verbal. Nope, everything as usual. Then this meeting is over. We'll meet tomorrow at the same time. Both nodded and rose, leaving in the next step. The head teacher on his side took a moment to unwind. Everything was as planned. The clones hadn't failed in their job, and had infiltrated the school without issue. On one side the Chunin was glad of this, as this meant Naruto had this much more chance of passing, while another was dismayed a little that this had been so easy. While Naruto was good at what he did, this also showed how easy it was to infiltrate this academy. He'd have to make sure to fix this, at least as soon as Naruto and his clones were out of the academy. Yup, that's what he'd do. AAAAARRRRGGGGHHHH. Iruka was interrupted in his musings by that hard yelling. Jumping out of his chair, he surged through the door, running full pace until he arrived at the maths classroom, where his college was standing, still raging. After a quick look that the other teacher was fine, Iruka turned towards the classroom. And instantly had to hold his laughter back, as it would instantly destroy whatever trust Kazuhi had for him. It was evident who had gone through here. On every surface of the class the words, I will not bother other students were written. And by every surface he really meant every surface. In chalk on both the blackboards, in ink on each poster and each visible sheet of paper. In paint on the ceiling, walls, and on every single tile of the floor. Stepping inside the class, Iruka went to the teacher's desk and grabbed the maths book there. Looking through it, he saw how throughout his protege had been. Every single page was now impossible to read due to the words on every page. A quick check at 2 random books in a closet at the back of the class showed the same. That boy must be punished harshly for this. Kazuhi yelled. That boy, Kiratori said as he reached his colleague. You think a single boy made this? I must say it sounds preposterous, Iruka added, still holding back his laughter. It would take at least 10, if not 20 people acting in concert to manage such a thing. The head teacher thanked God right there that barely anyone knew of Naruto's skill in the cage bunshin. Hopefully it would stay that way for a while. I agree, added the taijutsu teacher. Well, he was the one alone in here being punished. Responded the maths educator. I would find it more plausible that a group of people entered the room after this student left, and defaced this class hoping for this very result. I have no liking for the Uzumaki boy, but I won't have him punished for something he visibly couldn't have done, said the taijutsu teacher. Well, at the very least, he's going to be the one cleaning it, answered Kazuhi. And why is that? Said Iruka. He was supposed to stay in the room until I came back. And if it is as you said, he added, looking at Kiratori. This wouldn't have happened if he'd been still there. True, I will not oppose that. Then I'll have Naruto here before classes start to clean up. He couldn't go against both like that, and even there he wouldn't. One should clean up his messes, and that Naruto knew that well. Iruka arrived in the council room to find every single Naruto there laughing. He was pretty sure what they were laughing at. I must admit, Naruto, you haven't lost your touch. But you do know that you'll have to clean everything up tomorrow, don't you? The group looked at each other and started another round of laughter, while a single one, which I expected was the real Naruto, answered. No worries, I planned it that way. The Chunin took the last empty place at the table, and Naruto started the meeting. Welcome, all, to the meeting of those in the know. Today was the first day at the academy and, as such, the first day our prank is live. First, Iruka, status report. No suspicion amongst the teachers. None, the teacher answered, smiling. Naruto was doing well in a leadership position. The only discussion I had with the other educators was about your prank. Nothing else came up. Perfect. I do have a few questions. Ask away, the real one said, while the others turned towards the Chunin. Did you really do anything to disturb Kazuhi's class? No, nope, no, sensei, answered simultaneously Naruto, Iruka and Murmuru. Nothing like that, Aikibo added. It was the blonde boy 2 desk left of Naruto who threw a paper under his desk. Tall as this. Iruka held his hand at a specific height in the air. Wears glasses. Yes. Then I know who it is, he responded gravely. That was a returning student, and the teacher was pretty sure that he'd done it exactly to get this result. I'll take care of this. Don't worry about it, sensei, said the original student. It is better if it stays that way. Less pressure on the 2 others. Iruka nodded, even if he didn't agree. He was going to mount a file against every single abuse of power recorded against Naruto, even if he wasn't going to be able to use it while said boy was in school. He was pretty sure the Hokage would want to know, anyway. Anything else? Asked the Naruto upon which Aikibo was standing. No, nothing else. So, second point, Ariko's error. Upon which moment said Bunshin yelled, hey, we need to bring up what she promised. What she promised, said Iruka. Iruka made the mistake of saying that her father was a clothes merchant from Grass. Murmuru said in a way much closer to the one the real Naruto used, but with a different tone. Before a group of girls asking questions about Aikibo, they ended up managing to have Iruka promise them a show of her father's best clothes before long. Suzuki Fumishi, Mori Nishi, Hayabashi Asano and Kimura Ringo, the Chunin asked. Yup, those and Okita Mihoshi. Iruka laughed at that. He heard about those, where most of the kunoichi in the year previous had been boy-obsessed, or even Sasuke-obsessed. Those four were already known to be fashion-obsessed. And they'd gotten a new member too. It was probably the worst choice of profession to say. Outside fashion designer, maybe. The rest of the bunchins ended up joining in the laughter, even Iruka, and it lasted a good minute. To continue, Naruto said, "We'll need to have a number of clones looking at the fashions of Konoha for comparison. I'm appointing the task to you both." He pointed at the two civilian clones, Kumori and Kokue. The two nodded. "We've already received confirmation messages from the clones in grass, including a few memories of current fashions, so that side is taken care of. When you find something, have Ane or Janae make the trip to grass." They nodded again. "Good. Anything else about school?" All the clones either answered or shook their heads no, while Iruka raised his voice. "A question actually. Go on. What's your opinion about Kiratori, the new teacher?" he said, looking directly at the real Naruto. "Strict with me, actually, much more than with the others," he answered. "But no real complaint. He's doing his job 100 times better than Mizuki ever did." Mizuki tended towards ignoring Naruto, all the while appearing friendly when alone with Naruto. The boy now saw it for what it was, that is a way of sabotaging him while not affecting the rest of the class. "He knows what he teaches," added Murmuru. "He's a better taijutsu teacher than any we ever had." "I'll second that," said Iruka. "Then we can consider that matter closed," said Naruto as leader of the meeting, and Iruka left it at that. It would have to be good enough. The next point. The clone network. He pointed at a group of 3 bunchins with twice as much paper in front of them as the others. "That's your show." "Yes," said a clone in the middle, while unrolling a few maps. "Here's the latest." The first map was one of Fire Country, while the second and third were both respectively of the east and west borders of said country. There were dots on all maps, though much more on the first. The only region outside the Land of Fire that had a large number of dots was grass. As you can probably guess, the dots are the various places we have clones stationed. Most of them luckily have managed to find either jobs or shelter, if not both, but we have more than a dozen still looking. Said jobs are mainly physical work, especially for male clones, or the service industry in the case of females. None in the kind of service I am thinking of, I hope, the original Naruto said. No, but a few were asked. The closest we have to that is a bunchin working in a massage place. Good, said a few clones. The rest nodded. Iruka, however, had not yet moved his face from the maps. At first he tried to count the dots, but quickly gave up on that as impossible. Looking wider at the regions didn't help. He shook his head quickly to try to focus, and to dispel whatever illusion was in front of him. It didn't help. Naruto really was saying that he had clones in over half Fire Country. "This is really true," the Chunin said, looking up at the trio. All 3 nodded solemnly. "Mind if I test that?" "How?" said the one in the middle. He pointed at a dot at seemingly random. "Who's the one there?" 2 of the clones in the trio turned to the one on the left, who started looking into a large ledger he'd been carrying. It took a few moments, but he came back with an answer. 2 clones there. Brothers. They go by the name of Mizuno. Both work in the gold mines there. Eldest is Ichiro, youngest is Taro. They live together in a small room they rented at their supervisor's suggestion. Started working there yesterday." He looked up from his reading. "Is that enough for you?" Iruka nodded numbly. He'd chosen that place as he'd once done a mission there, one of his last as a Chunin outside the academy. It fit what he knew of the place. That meant this whole map thing wasn't a prank on him by Naruto. "Did you really manage to have cage bunchins in half of the country in close to a week?" "How?" The original Naruto quickly looked around. "How about I answer that afterwards, sensei? I kinda want to finish this meeting as quickly as possible." Thinking for a second, Iruka realized that Naruto was afraid that people outside would notice that either the 2 ninja clones or the 2 civilian clones were missing. He personally thought that this had a very low possibility, but there was little lost in humoring the blonde. "Okay, good, then last point," he said, once again sounding like a leader. "Civilian, that's you. What's been happening since the last meeting? We finally have the place we wanted, and are starting to make it ready for the shop. It cost us quite a bit more than expected, as the original owner haggled as much as possible for it. We ended up having to go over him to his boss to get anywhere," said the boy, Kokue. "We will be starting civilian school sometime this week, as soon as the paperwork goes through," added her sister, Kumori. "We should be starting to look for wares to selling either tomorrow or the very next day." "Good," said the Naruto serving as a seat to Aikibo. "Hopefully everything will be perfect by the next meeting. Anyone has anything else to add?" Silence answered him. "Good, then this meeting is now closed. The next one will be in 3 days, where I'll be summoning Nanabo-o, so be ready to explain things if needed, okay?" "Okay, sure, yup," the mass of copies answered, and then left their seats one by one, leaving only the original, Aikibo and Iruka in the room. "Now, about this explanation," asked the Chunin. "Can we talk while walking?" Naruto responded, rising. "While walking? You wanted me to fix the mess I made in Kazuhi's class, no?" He was silent for a moment. "Yes, right," he said, rising. He'd completely forgotten about it for now. "Aikibo, stay here. I'll be back as soon as I'm done," Naruto added towards his rider. Said rabbit jumped off. "Be back soon," he said, waving. Naruto did not start talking until the 2 of them were in the tunnels. "Now, explaining," he said. "How much do you know about the cage bunchin?" The teacher opened his mouth to answer, only to close it back up less than a second later. "Not much I must say," he finally responded. Now, I've been doing tests with this technique ever since I learned it, and I'm probably one of the people who know this technique the best, the student said. So I know that calling it only a clone is like saying a ninja is only a soldier. It is, in a way, true, but only a part of the whole. The Cage Bunshin is a jutsu that makes a copy of everything the user is as a shell to contain an amount of raw chakra. Depending on how real you make the shell, it will both consume more chakra to maintain itself, and be an exact copy deeper. Deeper. Yup, deeper. Making a sign with both hands, he summoned a single clone beside him. Look. The clone took his kunai and started cutting his way into his hand. For an instant Iruka even saw bone, before blood obscured his vision. The clone dispelled itself soon afterwards. See, he did, but that wasn't what had stuck to his mind. How come it didn't dispel itself from the damage? Because I made it more real. It burns chakra like water though, and it wouldn't have lasted more than 10 minutes at that, the boy answered. The ones usually created have nothing but a paper-thin layer that's real, and that's why they're dispelled so easily. The ones I make now have a few millimeters of real surface, which is what I found the best in terms of toughness to time ratio. Along with all of that is a copy of the user's mind and memories, so that the clone can act independently and use whatever skills its creator has. That still doesn't explain how you managed to build a network like yours in a week. I'm getting there, he answered. Now what makes my clones dangerous is that they have a way of draining chakra. And that there's chakra everywhere. Everywhere, everywhere. Trees have chakra. Grass has chakra. Even the air has chakra. It's different from human chakra, or so my clones say, but they can subsist on it. Now let's imagine one of my clones on a road. He basically has as much chakra as it wants, since it can drain the very environment when he needs to. Say this clone makes another every time the road forks. How many clones will there be in the end? One for every fork on the road, Iruka answered quickly. Nope, one for every fork on every road. Because the copy made at the first fork will also make a clone when it gets to a fork, as will every clone he makes. And every clone his clones make. And every clone. I think I got it now, the Chunin said, stopping his student. It wasn't addition, it was multiplication. No wonder Naruto had been able to do so much in so little time. Why haven't you taken over the village or something? With the manpower you have it would be easy. Cause the clones aren't without their weaknesses. Even removing damage, they are naturally weak against chakra. How so? You know the genjutsu dispelling method. The Chunin nodded. Naruto made another clone. Use it on this one. He did, not expecting anything, and was surprised when the Bunshin burst into smoke. Why? Simple. Most applications of chakra on the shell that is a clone disturb his containment ability, dispelling it. Someone powerful enough could actually go around dispelling hundreds at will, and it's not like ninja villages lack people who know how. The main reason my clones can spread easily like this is that nobody tests if they are real. Security through obscurity, really. The teacher nodded. And now that we're there I'm going to show you another thing I found about the Cage Bunshin jutsu. There. A quick look around revealed to Iruka that the two of them were but a dozen meters from the academy, and he hadn't even noticed. He just focused on Naruto's words, and didn't realize the distance they were covering. It seemed that Naruto could make an efficient teacher, also. Unlocking the door, Iruka led the academy student to the class he had pranked. Opening the door and the lights, he motioned Naruto to come inside. Now, what else did you want to show me? He said, smiling. His favorite student was still full of surprises. He wondered for an instant if he could manage to have Naruto teach him his favorite technique. Watch. Naruto took a marker from the teacher's desk, put it in his pocket, then made another clone. And what is so special about this? The clone took out the marker, uncapped it, and started doodling on a desk, making the words already there illegible. Hey, Iruka yelled, but his student silenced him with a simple sign of the hand. The clone quickly finished his job, covering half the desk with black ink, then turned towards its summoner. 2 minutes. It asked. Perfect, Naruto answered. The clone then dispelled itself. And the desk was back in its original, albeit written on, state. How? Iruka said, once again. This seemed to be his word of the day. When you make a clone, you clone everything. You don't summon a naked, weaponless copy, do you? No. Well, a Cage Bunshin is the same. Everything is copied. That also means that everything disappears once the clone does, which include paint, ink and the like. Watch. The both of them waited for a minute, then everything written, outside of the lines on the board, vanished without a trace. The only issue with cloning objects is that the objects have the same resistance as the clone, that is to say none. And dispelling an object dispels the clone, along with every object that was created with it. That's why one doesn't clone food. That was actually how Naruto had found out. A clone had offered, cloned, ramen to a group of Bunshins, planning to dispel itself once they were all eating. The joke turned on him when he disappeared after the first bite. After looking around one last time, the teacher turned towards the student. Then I grade you a plus in pranking, with a perfect score. Surprising, efficient, harmless while not seeming so, and easily removed. I'll tell the other teachers that I had you come during the night to clean it off. He smiled, and then ruffled Naruto's hair with his hand. Now go. I'm pretty sure Aikibo's waiting for you, and that you have a lot to do. Teacher and student then each went their own way, both with a smile on his face. Happy 2011 everyone, and to all a great year. As a New Year's gift to you I have a small challenge. There's a little hidden joke in some of the names of the new characters, that I ended up placing for fun. I am giving naming rights to the next original character please, at least something sounding even remotely Japanese to the first person who finds it. I read every single review or PM, so I'll find out either way. To the few who asked about using names, characters or concepts from my stories, you have permission as long as you credit me for what you take. See you all in the next chapter.